Hello, my name is Maya, and you will find out everything about my work on my website, darkermaterials.com. But just briefly here, just to give you a brief introduction. So basically, I use astrology and the language of archetypes for shadow work, my own personal for decades, and found it immensely potent and helpful and supportive, most importantly. And in my astrology reading, that is what I focus on. I go, as I like to say, shadow hunting for my clients to illuminate their own darker materials, as I like to call them, or in other words, their shadow, to therefore catalyze and support and help on their own way of doing their own shadow work. I also have two other modalities or ways of working with clients with their shadow work. They're not related to astrology, and I will be touching on one of them later in the presentation. But yeah, if you're curious, check out on my website. There are sections on that and you'll see, and then if it resonates, do let me know. We can maybe work together. Okay, so today's presentation is on the upcoming eclipse season of the summer 2020. So as I suspect all of us would agree with this statement that 2020 is a year that changed everything. We have had a lot of alone time to rethink and reconsider, and we're not settling anymore. We're awakening to our agency, our choice-making power. I took a good look at the astrology of this summer eclipse season and exercised my own choice-making power, and I chose only interpretations that I think offer us the best tools for co-creating the most soulful, brave new world and our deeply meaningful place in it. So my intention isn't so much to teach or talk about astrology, although we'll do quite a bit of that as well. My primary intention is to inspire you and to surprise you into seeing yourself in fresh and exciting new ways. I hope you enjoy it. And if so, please consider sharing this presentation. And there is also a free guide of this, the same version, basically like a PDF format on my website, darkermaterials.com. That might be easier to share and to read maybe, and to have as your kind of companion throughout the eclipse season. So do help yourself to that as well. Okay, so this is how I like to, when I work or just in life, is sort of preface myself and say, this is where I'm coming from, this is what I'm doing here, and so that you kind of have a clearer boundary of where you end and I begin, and the other way around. So regarding this presentation, I would like to invite you, it is my gift to you, but it's really not me or about me, it's about you. You matter the most. In the sense that even though this presentation is an expression of my desire and a deepest desire to show you a way to engage with the eclipse season and in turn spark your passion for shadow work, I highly recommend that you pay at least as much attention to your responses to what I'm saying as you do to what I'm sharing here. And I'll elaborate on this, you know, this will be a theme occurring throughout the presentation, very appropriate to the eclipse work that we are invited to do. And so I have designed the presentation and the guide, if you choose to go for the PDF as well, to intrigue you, and my particular favorite, provoke you. So you reconsider everything and anything that tickles your fancy and your wandering beautiful spirit, and ultimately fast track your individuation, which is really your path to wholeness, and more on that a bit later. So the eclipse experience, I would imagine, again, this is most people's, but again, speaking from my own, it has always been like stepping into another dimension. So as we cross and move through the portal, which I'll talk about in a moment, the reality starts to shift, but it's still the same reality. I can definitely recognize it. There's nothing too, different about it, but it feels different. Another thing I noticed, again, I suspect anyone would agree, or many would agree with this, is that our experience of time changes, and it's warped. It's like, and this is definitely probably the most potent, most measurable quality of the eclipse season and eclipse experience, is that it can feel, so they can last between anything between 2 weeks, not best with maths, up to 6 weeks, and I'm not sure if longer. But yet it can feel that we have been through a year-long soul-searching journey, because at the end of it, we can feel so changed, so deeply. Something has so moved and shifted within us that it's not that we are unrecognizable, but near enough. And just in case anyone, I know there is like, is this a superstition or something, old wives' tales? I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but like the eclipses are bad omens, like terrible things happen. Yeah, again, based on my experience, but I think it's even more helpful way to look at it is that it is like full moons, even when they're new moon eclipses, that they are essentially like full moons on steroids. So the intensity and the volatility is big. But it's ultimately a very supportive experience. It's, as you probably share this view with me as well, is that universe supports us at all times, but particularly during these eclipses. This is like a highway to our upgrade of consciousness of ourselves. It's a highway. So it's not a meandering path on a lovely meadows. It's a highway to heaven. Okay, so how do you want to use this? So things to ponder as, as we approach the first eclipse, but actually, as you will see far earlier, how do you want to use this powerful time? What new, improved, and upgraded reality do you want to co-create with the energies of the eclipses? Who do you want to be when you come out on the other side? So those are the big questions for this big work that we are asked to do for this big event that happens twice a year, every year. So yeah, please consider those questions as you move through it. So I work with eclipse portals. I call them eclipse portals. I don't know if this is, I don't think this is an official astrological term, as in that what I consider them is actually what the community of astrologers are conventionally or traditionally or consider. But that's how I make sense of it, or rather how it works best for me. So for me, eclipse portals are the preceding moon phase to the first eclipse and the following moon phase after the last eclipse. So the two act as bookends, but more importantly, they act as containers, like really solid containers, no matter what the sign and archetype is. The preceding moon phase is like gives us time, if we're working intentionally with it and are aware of this portal, like take this moon phase as the portal entry way into the eclipse season. It's super supportive because it's like time to prepare. You have 2 weeks to really think about what you want to do, what kind of work you want to do for yourself, on yourself. You have those 2 weeks, like a grace period of preparation, and universe supports you even more so because it is in the run-up to the eclipse. And then the other end is like, it changes the flavors of that work of preparation and release at the end, or integration really more than release, I would say. Depend on whether it's full moons or new moons at those ends. But yeah, that's for a different maybe conversation. So the integration at the end and the preparation at the beginning serve as, like I say, holding this really intense cosmic energetic event that is, like I say, I like to call it full moon on steroids. So it's a great way to start and to end. So some of the tips, I will list a few more actually than what I've written here. How to do this preparation. I mean, obvious one probably everyone already does and knows is declutter your home, or at least this one room where you spend a lot of your contemplative and time and the time you'll be engaging with the eclipses, and if you're into rituals, to have your rituals performing. So declutter at least that space, because that will help the energies move cleaner and more flowy and freely. And you'll be releasing stuck energies, old energies, by decluttering. So that's one thing. My favorite, because I'm not so much into rituals like in a traditional sense, but the most potent and the most consistent, like a helper during the eclipses for me, is if I create space around me wherever I look in this one area in my home where I spend, doing all this work the most, wherever I look is just beautiful to my taste, completely and utterly to my taste, unapologetically. So I find that elevates the vibration when you as an individual find something beautiful, even if no one else thinks that's beautiful. Don't you feel like you just expand? So if you beautify your space, whatever that means for you, you will automatically, as you move through it and see those beauties everywhere you look, you will be raising your vibration. That's one of the key aspects to start creating internal feeling space, emotion, inner psychic space that you want to see yourself manifesting and living in the near future, or even far future, or both. So in this eclipse season, you created by this mini cosmos in your own small space, and the beauty, I find it's really conducive to elevating you fast. In addition to all these beautiful things, treat yourself to a new beautiful journal. I certainly do every time. And if you can afford, or if it's your thing, oracle deck. More so than tarot, I find, because tarot is like too kind of like there are too many rules, like how to interpret them. Well, obviously, no one needs to stick to them, and I certainly don't too much. But still, where oracle deck is like it opens up a free for all interpretation, freedom of movement. You can maneuver yourself through with the image however you feel it speaks to you. But if you see, I don't know, 8 of Swords or 3 of Swords, I don't know. It might take more work to see that as elevating your energy. And this is something, these little rituals, the little things I'm talking about, the ones that kind of help you raise your vibration. But obviously your call. Another important thing is, I find, if at all possible, take time out of relationships that do not actually feel nutritious enough for you. They don't feed you good food, energetically speaking. I find this so important. So, okay, you might not be lucky enough to to do that, to be able to do that. Maybe you are in relations, you can't just, whether it's work, maybe in pandemic, not so much, but still, that you have people around you that you can't just like not have around you during the eclipse season, and yet they're not exactly most nutritious to you. So if you can't just kind of, take yourself out of them for this period, I would then, a great tip is to make it part of your new moon intention, and at the portal stage, as I'll go into the moment, to not engage with these relationships. That's not to say that you don't speak to them. Of course not. I just mean don't engage in any conflict, in any explaining, to get stuck in a loop of that old pattern of whatever it isn't nutritious about them. Yeah. So the best kind of advice I can think of is like, you acknowledge the other person or thing, well, person, I would imagine, and respectfully, feedback that you have received, whatever they're saying, and if at all possible, ask for time to come back to them. You'll reconsider whatever that is. Essentially, be guided by inner calm and not wanting anything from them as a way of appeasing your discomfort with the connection and relationship. So your kind of guide is like, am I now being triggered? I'm trying to fill in this gap that's now being created, I'm uncomfortable about. No, if you can keeping yourself to yourself and just being respectful and knowledgeable of them, but not engaging in that back and forth, that would serve you well. That's almost as good as that's really good. In fact, that's kind of you practicing something that will, you know, serve you particularly well. Okay. The facts. So this is the astrology part of it. So on 22nd of May, it's what I call a portal, and it opens. It's a new moon in Gemini at 2 degrees. Now, key aspects with it are retrograde Gemini Venus, conjunct Mercury in Gemini, obviously. Mercury is not retrograde at this point. But what's so important, and I find, you know, meaningful, is that this is their only conjunction in 2020. The next time they're conjunct is in April 2021. And it's not actually an exact conjunction either. It's like they almost meet, like I think it's just under a 1 degree off. I mean, it's definitely considered astrologically a conjunction, but like I say, they don't actually make it exact. And so I think that's really meaningful. This is the first round that will, as we open and start into the eclipse season. And they're both widely conjunct Gemini North Node. Now, beautifully, Saturn trines this moon and Mars squares it. On 5th of June, we have a first eclipse, full moon in 15 Sag, Sagittarius. Retrograde Gemini Venus is conjunct the Sun and opposite the moon, obviously. All squaring Mars Neptune conjunction in Pisces, and the Mars Neptune are the leg of the T square. On 21st of June, we have the solar eclipse in Cancer, new moon at 0 degree Cancer. This eclipse is conjunct Gemini North Node, out of sign, but still. Saturn makes an exact opposition to this Cancer eclipse, new moon, and Mars and Neptune are still in that leg of the T square. And then the eclipse is sandwiched between Mercury stationing retrograde on 18th of June and Venus stationing direct on 25th of June. On 5th of July, we have a lunar eclipse, full moon at 13 degrees Capricorn. Mars and Chiron are now the leg of the T square to the eclipse, and Pluto is at 24 Capricorn, widely conjunct the moon, but widely. And the portal closes, the eclipse portal closes on 20th of July with a new moon at 28 degrees Cancer. Now, this new moon is also, like the solar eclipse at 0 Cancer, this new moon at 28 Cancer is in exact opposition to to Saturn. And Saturn is also part of the triple conjunction with Pluto and Jupiter in Capricorn. So this is a throwback to the Pluto-Saturn conjunction we just had in January. So these are the facts, and let me remind you of just some other facts that I find are echoing another presentation you may have already seen on EA Zoom meetings about the coronavirus astrology, but really it's about the Pluto-Saturn conjunction and what I call our new soul's mandate. Our individual soul, but also collectively far more important. And that it's echoed in this eclipse that we're coming into. So those facts are that, you know, this January Pluto conjunction is started a new phase in the Pluto-Saturn relationship. And each phase, or rather each cycle of that relationship starts with a new phase conjunction, and then until it makes full circle and comes back to another new conjunction, which in their case will be happening in Pisces in many, many decades. So a few decades. Now, in this cycle that we just started in January, there are 4 critical points. And they're all time-stamped or punctuated or signified or accompanied by Venus in Gemini retrograding at the time, the same year, sometimes on the actual date, as if you watch my presentation, you'll see. This is unprecedented. And that's why I'm saying that the Venus, if we are to understand what this soul mandate is, what were we tasked? What is the next leg of our soul's journey, evolutionary journey? We need to really get cozy and uncomfortable with what Venus in Gemini retrograde is saying to us. So this is just like a little sliver and a snippet of that presentation, the other presentation I had. So consider this. The future of pleasure is sexless. Hermaphroditus is the archetype of self-pleasure. And self-pleasure is the path to wholeness. Consider this quote by Richard Rudd. To bring an end to all conflict, to raise our vibration and have peace on earth, we need to give up our sexual attractions. So keep all of this in mind, just from now till at least certainly till 2028, and then 2036 and 2044. But particularly during this eclipse season and starting with 22nd of May, new moon intentions, bear all this in mind. You do what you want with it, but just bear in mind, don't dismiss it too quickly. And obviously look at your reactions to it. So eclipse tips. This is what my tips for how to work with your chart and with the eclipse. So for any moon, back to the fact sheet, look at the degrees of any of those phases, wherever the moon is, and see if you have anything conjuncting it in your natal chart. That would be particularly potent archetype to consider for your intentions, that particular archetype, but also squares and oppositions. Now I work with 5 degrees either side. If they're out of sign, depends, make your own judgment, but I think 5 degrees either side is okay. The tighter the orb, the more important that other archetype that has been pulled into the eclipse, the moon, therefore it's more important, right? The tighter the orb. If it's so if we're looking at the Gemini and Sagittarius, you're looking at what you have around 2 degrees, Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces. And when you're looking at Cancer and Capricorn ones, it's Cancer and Capricorn and Aries and Libra you want to look at. So the squares and oppositions and conjunctions that are most potent and the best for shadow work. And the clues that you are actually doing the work is, pretty obvious thing, I suppose, but let me just say it, is that you are noticing you're being triggered, there are crises that you feel internally or maybe externally, and the challenge is knocking you off course. Now, if you're like an intermediate or advanced level of astrology knowledge and practice, I would highly recommend you look into in conjunctions that the eclipses are forming in your chart. So with Gemini, you're looking at Capricorn, Scorpio. Anyway, you'll figure out what it is. And with Cancer, you will look at, I'll be taking up too much time trying to think of that off the top of my head. But so if you're advanced, really, that's what I mean, and you will know what those are. Because my take on inconjunctions is that they are the squares of the Aquarian age. Squares are all century, all paradigm, inconjuncts where we want to be, what we want to be really kind of, getting really understanding and working with. So setting the new moon intentions. So I would again look at the degree the new moon is making. So the usual traditional advice, and I follow it sometimes, is that you obviously wait till the new moon is actually happened, and then the best time to set intentions is between its completion, so it's new moon, right, until it stops making an aspect to a planet, or all planets rather, what it's called void of course. So you don't set intentions during a void of course moon. However, this is a good advice in general, but I would say, and I've certainly worked like this, is that if void of course moon actually is conjunct one of my natal planets, that's a super potent time for me to set new intention. You don't want that to be too many degrees away from the new moon or the eclipse moon, whatever. But again, make your judgment. And if it's out of sign, I wouldn't be too, again, make your judgment. But what you then do is then you consider the archetype and it's really only conjunctions you kind of want to be looking at mostly. You can do oppositions and squares, but I would recommend conjunctions primarily to keep it simple. And then incorporate the archetype into your intentions. The highest expression of that archetype, because you want to be aiming high, I would imagine. Also, if you love creating rituals, create a ritual of merging with that archetype that the eclipse is making a conjunction to in your natal chart. So that natal chart archetype of yours, create a ritual of you merging with that, but always, very important, make it very clear that your intention for merging is for the highest good of everyone, the planet and of course yourself. And then the lunar eclipse tips, so those are full moons, extra potent. Those are the times when we really receive big revelations and sudden clarity around the themes of the archetypes involved. In our natal chart, the way the full moons are touching and what they're touching in the natal chart, but also sometimes just the full moon and as well. Also times for releasing what doesn't serve you anymore. Although I'll talk about that, what I consider quality releasing, more helpful way of releasing. This season in particular, consider how much of your sense of self and self-worth, when it comes to the lunar eclipses, the full moons, this eclipse season, right? Consider how much of your sense of self and self-worth is wrapped up in these concepts: family, parents and children, present and absent, expired soul contracts, dependencies on old tired societal structures and allegiances, and all ancestral grief and suffering. Now, time to get to work. The portal opens. What's the work? State your vision clearly. So consider this. Clean up your language so you not only manifest a life so deeply satisfying and uniquely yours, but you also enjoy relationships both freeing and nurturing. This message sets the tone and the core theme, which is language. So the language is the core theme. So not only of the eclipse season that we are entering through this portal where Gemini, Venus retrograde, conjunct Mercury are so setting the stage, right? But because those archetypes, Venus retrograde, Gemini, are also the messenger of the soul's, new soul's mandate, starting with the Pluto-Saturn conjunction we just had. So it's like so important that we clean up our language at this stage. So make sure you set your vision in the most beautiful, your sense of beauty only, precise. So be clear, be careful that you don't use the same term to describe different things, because it'll be muddled. There's no danger or anything, but it's just like it won't be sharp enough, it won't be clear enough. So, happy what? Happy this, happy that? Well, clarify what's happy in this part of the intention paragraph and what does happy mean in this other. So get as precise and clear as you can, and make sure it's a self-serving language you're using. So it's all about you. Don't feel shame or guilt about being selfish, using selfish language. Selfish doesn't mean harming anyone else. It's just meaning loving and looking after yourself, because how else can you look after anyone else? So you're doing service to the world by first doing good job for yourself and taking care of yourself first. So in that sense, self-serving language. Vision setting prompts. So these are the questions that, if any of them resonate, just use them to journal or to help you kind of get clear about your vision. And the vision is as far as 2036, I would say. But yeah, even just for the next few months, whatever. But you can go as far as that, to go really wild. And what is this? So if you were an all-powerful creator, what world would you create and what roles would you give yourself in it? So what world do you want to live for the rest of your living days? In that sense, 2036 or beyond, if you want. And then as you describe, this is so important to describe that vision, that world in the sensory language, still sticking to the beauty, precision and self-servingness of that language, but make it sensory. So you actually can, because the more your senses get triggered, let's say, by your language, the more you will actually feel that vision. And that if you get to feel the world you want to inhabit one day, you want to create one day, if you get yourself to feel it daily during the eclipse season, it's like, yeah, it's fast tracking you to that world you want to create. And do this, so when you set the vision, I mean, when you set those intentions and vision, which is part of the same thing really, then read it out to yourself every morning and every evening, or you know, at least once a day. But the moment you do not feel that energy of excitement and expansion in you as you read those words, something is not, you're either not paying attention, you're kind of reading on autopilot, or the vision needs tweaking. So keep tweaking throughout the whole eclipse season. Other questions: who are you when no one's watching? Who would you be and what would you do if you never had to worry about money and health? And why would you be those things? What desires scares you? What desires of yours scare you the most? That's a good one, I think. Another one, my favorite for my coaching clients. If you knew you were going to die in 6 months from now on, what would you do with the time you have left? Lunar eclipse. The work for this phase of the eclipse is make art out of old beliefs. And if you remember, I said this whole concept of releasing, letting go of things. I struggled a long time with that because, and this is my personal, so this whole thing is obviously my personal take on it. So if you resonate, super. So I'm all about this plane, this earth plane. I'm not in a rush to evolve and become energy, highest vibration, ascend. Absolutely not interested. I want to just live my full self in this body, in this incarnation, in this lifetime. And that's been in itself, you know, a mega task, mammoth task, to learn to do that well and gracefully. And I'm still not, you know, finished the article. My point is that I want all of me to count for something, to be meaningful. All of my stuff that's now not interesting anymore and that I discarded, or that I don't use, that I don't, you know, that don't play part in my life, I don't want to let go. I want to make something of it, hence art. So it's not to say that you, by making them into art, it's almost like a loving send-off. And then you can maybe do something with art, maybe let go of the art, but don't just give it form. Give it. It's like a respect-paying thing that I find when I do that, and I find it doesn't stick with me. It's like as I make it, it's like if you make anything, if you're an artist by, you know, or writer or anything, once you write something, it's like it's outside of you. That's a way of kind of getting it out of you. But you've given it form. You didn't just like kind of dismiss it. So that's make art out of all beliefs. Why do we believe something? Because we desire it to be true. We are invested in it being true, or we lose something important, our sense of self, sense of belonging. So we make it our truth. We decide that it means, and then fill the blank, because we need it to mean that. Because if it doesn't mean what we need it to mean, who are we? What does that say about us if that's not true? All this to say that actually our beliefs are our choices we make. So I talked about the art. And so yeah, some tips there. Take an uncomfortably close look at your emotional investment in being right, and all the ways you identify with your personal, spiritual, and life philosophy. Who are you without them? So now make art of your answers. Solar eclipse. So this is Cancer new moon. Consider this. It is our suffering that brings us together, not love. And this is Ursula Le Guin, the author of The Handmaid's Tale, that you may be familiar from the book time, but also is a Netflix series of recent-ish time. So this piece is that Saturn opposition to this new moon, and then the closing portal new moon as well. And both are throwbacks to, particularly the closing of the portal, are throwback to the Pluto-Saturn conjunction we had, which is our new soul's mandate. And essentially, it's each of these times we are, well, invite is a way of putting it, but I would want to use a stronger word. We are demanded. It's demanded of us. We are asked it's an imperative that we separate. And in separation, actually find wholeness. So I'll be talking a little bit more about that, but let me just, so when we come together, we amplify whatever we bring to each other. So back to this, it's our suffering that brings us together, not love. So we make more of that thing that we bring. So if we are being drawn to each other and want to connect and stay connected with each other, it is out of some shared pain, some shared difficulty to help each other. It's all good intentions for most of us anyway, but just consider that actually we are amplifying that. That's our connective tissue, and that's the energy flowing between us. It's about this pain we have, and it's, you know, that we are helping maybe each other solve or not, but it's the connecting tissue between us, and therefore it's doubled. So in another sense, this is how we are just increasing the suffering or pain or hurt or whatever that keeps us together, that makes us feel it's you know, burden shared is burden half or something, that expression. But we are actually doubling it in terms of, it might be easier for us, but we are doubling in the collective energetically. We're just, you know, increase that footprint of pain, let's say. And so could we instead consider that out of love, consider separating from all of whom we are connected out of fear or of pain. So I don't know if you have experienced this your firsthand, but love is freedom incarnate. It really is. Love doesn't need, when you love someone, but then you don't love someone else, that's not love. That's just, I'll leave it to that. That's not love. Love doesn't need an object of love. Love is a way of being. Love is a state. So out of that state of love, when you're in it, you will know that you do not need to connect. You are connected, and it's not a value judgment if you're not. And in that separateness, there is a proper sense of wholeness, because you're whole. You're not leaking out into anyone and being, you know, strung and pulled in different directions. You're whole. So separateness is past the wholeness, although I'll be talking about that in a moment again, I think, but anyway. So an exercise I highly recommend you do is collect photographs or any other visual reminders of people and experiences that trigger painful memories. The type of memories you otherwise are doing everything to avoid being reminded of. And then make a point to sit with them every day, looking at them, letting yourself feel all the difficult feelings that come up. Don't judge yourself. Don't edit your feelings. Don't talk over them. Instead, just sit with them and welcome them all. You will notice how the power those others held over you is returning back to you. So I can vouch for this one that works. Now, this is, let me just quickly see. Yeah. So this lunar eclipse is full moon in Capricorn. The work here is practicing rejection as medicine. So consider this. The only purpose other people have in our lives is to reflect us back to us. When someone triggers us, it is our response to that trigger that is our most helpful guide to freeing ourselves from the pain and upset other people make us feel. Our triggers are our responsibility. So I have spoken again at length, I think, in that other presentation. So if you want to get some other, a bit more on that, how I go through that, check the presentation out. But this is the piece de resistance of my life's work, if you like. And this is coming from my Venus conjunct Chiron, mostly. So here are some tips that, based on my own experience, have proven to be really helpful. So seek out unfavorable opinions of you from strangers. And if you're feeling particularly brave, from friends. But the point is not to react, is to just thank them. And this is back to this beginning, as I said, if you have to live with if you have to live with people or be surrounded with people that actually you don't find the connection you have with them nutritious enough for you to practice this. You don't have to ask them for the opinion, because you'll be probably getting those opinions even uninvited. But the point is then to stay rooted in yourself and not reach out and not try to fix anything, to correct, to make sure that they understood you, that you understood them. This is creating the loop of that unhealthy, sticky, not very nutritious, poor diet. Like, fast food or junk food or whatever. So the point is that if you're lucky not to have to do that, then maybe seek out strangers or somehow find ways to get someone to tell you something you actually struggle to hear, and then don't react, but actually sit with your reactions. Don't engage with them, but sit with your reactions to what's been said. And this is partly why this presentation, I said at the beginning, treat it as such. Use it as a practice ground, as a gym for this rejection as medicine. If something has triggered you in what I said, and you're just like all raging and whatever else you do, maybe, just why? Try to understand where is that coming from? What part of you feels rejected by what I'm saying, or by what this stranger, if you're doing this exercise. Another one that I find really helpful and good is to get creative and rewrite the scenes. So a situation where someone was really, you felt rejected by someone not understanding you or defriending you or accusing you or arguing back with you or just being angry with you, whatever, just you felt rejected, right? So rewrite the scene or scenes, but replace the other person's face with a mirror. So it's essentially like saying you are seeing yourself in that mirror. So that their response is utterly relevant, because it always is. For you, it is relevant for you. And then what do you see in that mirror? And or you can even stand in front of a mirror and have that conversation with them. That could be also even better. Depends whether you prefer writing or not. When you write, the work that the new path you're creating is possibly lasts longer or goes deeper, but not necessarily. Again, that's kind of maybe my experience. But my point is, you will see yourself and how actually it will diffuse so much of your anger or your anxiety or your frustration at the alleged misrepresentation, misunderstanding, and the rejection that ensued from that. And the final piece, my favorite, obviously, is to book a coaching session with me, in which I review you, and not just one-off, but that's the dynamic of the exchange. I'm feedbacking you in a way of criticizing and rejecting you, like you're an artwork. So I'm an art critic, and that's my absolute favorite piece of work that I have written stuff on my website. I'm not going to go into it now, and like I said, I'll have a separate presentation on just that. I called it discomforting work, and it's so amazingly potent and so deeply empowering. So if this resonates and you get kind of like tickles of curiosity and excitement, even better, do get in touch. And the portal closes. So this is the second opposition to the new moon in Cancer, the exact opposition to Saturn. But at this stage, this Saturn is conjunct Pluto and Jupiter. It's not a tightest of conjunctions, but it's a conjunction. And that's the ultimate thrust. So we close this eclipse season being reminded and being thrown back into the January new soul's mandate. It's like the cosmic setup is saying, don't forget this work. Don't forget this work of Cancer, Capricorn. You need to do that first before moving into the age of Aquarius. And to then thrive, to survive and then thrive in the age of Aquarius. So if the age of Pisces had us all chanting, we're all one, the mantra, it gets me every time, the mantra for thriving in the age of Aquarius is, we are all individuals, indivisible. That's what individual mean. We are indivisible. And as such, we're whole, right? But in order to fully individuate, we need to first feel truly at home, saying we are all separate. So I will just quickly, so the Pluto-Saturn conjunction is a metaphor for birth into the Aquarian age. And this is a reference to Stanislav Grof's perinatal matrices. So go back to the other presentation of mine. I have a good visual on that. And it's a beautiful metaphor of how we birth, how we say goodbye to Piscean age and how we enter into the Aquarian age. And the key piece there is Chiron, which is the bridge between Saturn and Uranus, Uranus being the Aquarian age, Saturn being the Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, the working and really needing to do the Saturn, the Capricorn Cancer axis work properly if we are to be born into the age of Aquarius, which is essentially the metaphor of being born, full stop, because we haven't yet been born, because we are latching onto, we cannot bear to separate. And there is an immense amount of grief associated with separateness. And I think I'm talking, yes, I'll do in a moment. But we need to get really good at being separate. And if you think of the current pandemic, and this is, like I say every time, it's not in the slightest making light of what's happening, the grief and the pain and the death that have happened and how it has affected the close and dear ones, but also the whole world, is not to make light of that. However, metaphorically and symbolically speaking, we are being forced because we just keep refusing to separate, to do the work of individuation, to say it's okay to not want to need you, not want to be connected with you out of some sense of usefulness, out of pain, out of everything else I mentioned here and elsewhere. It's okay. It doesn't make me a bad person to be selfish of the self, to belong to myself. No. So we are still deeply steeped in this old rhetoric and narrative of Piscean age that is just, it's like the virus of the times we're living in. It's a pathology. We have turned it because we just can't let go of it. So until we do that, and the way to do it is to really keep the mantra, we are all separate, and get really cozy and loving with that. We can't be born into the Aquarian age, is my theory, my take on it. So try this. Between 5th and 16th of July, review all that you have experienced and discovered about yourself and your co-creative process with the universe that you started on 22nd of May with the portal opening. What felt amazing? This is the key. It's focus on what feels good, not what didn't work or what doesn't, in terms of going forward. What do you want to feel more of? And release the rest by making art out of it. Also write down how much you changed. This is also beautiful. And become more, so write down how much you changed and become more of yourself since January 2020. But feel proud of that. But feel proud of yourself and really, really spend time congratulating yourself, treating yourself because you know you made that progress. But, and I'm sure you will, I certainly know I will, and I have already, if you need to grieve the you that is not more. And this is really big, big piece. So allow yourself to grieve well, grieve deeply, thoroughly. Don't take shortcuts. Just really sink into that grief of the death of your old self and all that was part of it. But by making art of it, you will have commemorated for the rest of your life in this lifetime, in this body. Isn't that beautiful? I think it is. And then between 18th of July and 3rd of August, on 3rd of August, at least UK time, we have Aquarius full moon, but that full moon is not part of the eclipse season, I mean. So, but between 18th of July and 3rd of August, pay close attention to any wounds around feeling small out of fear of rejection for shining bright and being who you are, taking up stage, being your leonine self, even if you're not Leo sun sign, we all have a Leo somewhere. So that is some part of you that wants to shine on the life's world stage, but you might feel like you have no right. Who am I to do that? People are going to be jealous. They're going to hate me. They're going to reject me, whatever, disown me, as in defriend me, blah, blah. So spend some time, looking into that. And then revisit your vision from 20. So this is all to do as the portal closes from 28th of, or even between, from 28th of, not 28th, sorry, 20th of July. And then revisit your vision from 22nd of May. What are you keeping, basically? What are you keeping of that? And what has been refined throughout this eclipse season with that regular daily revisiting of that vision and feeling into it? And is this still making me excited? And then if not, then rewriting. So what are you left at this point? What are you keeping? Maybe all of it, probably all of it. I know I did in previous eclipses because I kept refining it. So now you roll up your sleeves and start giving form to your dream. Saturn, form, right? Lasting form. I think that's it. So thank you so much for being here and with me, and hopefully you enjoy this presentation. So I have a PDF version of more or less what you just seen and heard me talk about. So I would highly recommend you go and grab yourself a coffee, that too, if that's your thing. Certainly is mine. So grab yourself a copy of my free eclipse guide by visiting my website, darkermaterials.com. And yeah, that would be like a good companion to keep referring to, either print out or on your laptop or wherever, to keep with you while you're working through the eclipse season. And and if you enjoyed, I would be very grateful if you share that amongst your community or friends, family, whatever, whoever you think it will resonate to be helpful to. Thank you.